everybody. Welcome to Church History for Chumps. Wow. And this is one of our favorite types of episodes to record because we don't have to work for it.
You do all the work for us.
You guys do. That's right. This is
how the pyramids were built.
That's right. That's right. Us lounging and everyone else stacking bricks.
Yep.
This is our Q&A episode, and we've been spamming questions or spamming, I guess, stories so that people could ask us questions, and you guys delivered. And some of these questions are good, and some, well, we'll see. But no, these are solid. I'm looking forward to it. And I think rather than bantering, which you've been doing more of lately, we should just jump right in. And we've got all the questions, so I would say let's just ping pong back and forth. We'll pick a question, we'll answer it. Pick another question, answer it.
Cool.
All right, you want to go first?
Yeah.
Cool.
Jude asks, of all the heresies discussed so far on the podcast, which one do you find the most ridiculous / dangerous?
Excellent question, Judith. I'm sorry, Jude. I just had like a middle school bully flashback, which I was not a bully in middle school. Quite the opposite, in fact. Shoot. That's a good question. I mean, there's some ridiculous heresies that we didn't do episodes on, which I'm kind of bummed about. Dangerous, though, man. I don't know. Shoot, dude, what jumps out to you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think dangerous. Arianism jumps out as like the big whopper, right?
Yeah.
It's like that one. If you get that wrong, you're not a Christian. Yeah. I think, though, as we got further along in the heresy series, specifically we're talking about the Christological heresies, they do get more dangerous in the sense that they're harder to spot.
Yeah.
They get trickier.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the farther down the line you get, by the time you get to Eutychianism, you're left, first of all, wondering, what was that again? But second of all, like they get a little bit hard to identify.
Yeah. I would say I think Eutychianism and Apollinarianism are both challenging because they downplay the significance of humanity and matter so much. And Eutychianism was kind of the idea that Jesus's humanity was like kind of subsumed into his divinity, which kind of creates this picture in your head of like, well, when I become united with Christ upon my death, it's almost like my humanity just gets kind of like vacuumed into this big nebulous divine ball. And yeah, I think that's bad. I think that our culture today is becoming very kind of like Neoplatonist in our kind of hatred of matter, and I think we're seeing our world destroy itself. I think we're seeing war on the news, and we're seeing pollution and the destruction of the climate, and we're just kind of getting more feudalist or fatalist about the world around us. So we're kind of retreating to this, let's just create a spiritual safe haven and anchor our hopes there. And I think that's really destructive because matter is the place where Jesus found a home with us, and that's important, and that's a place of redemption. So that's what I would say.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Thomas, who is the most controversial Christian historical figure? Asks my good friend Vi.
What's up, Vi? I've got two that come to mind.
Okay.
But I think one of them might be yours. So I'm curious to hear yours first. I'm gonna turn it back around.
I actually scratched my head about this for a long time because I think it's such a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
First one that jumped out to me, that was Constantine.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah,
that was the one that I was like, I think John might say that. So why is he controversial?
I think Constantine, one, I think he's misunderstood. I think that Constantine is kind of seen as the guy that like merged the empire with the church. So I think in in a lot of people's minds, Constantine is the dude who kind of like forced the church to sell out and become kind of like schleps for the state. And I don't think that's entirely true. I think there's a lot of good that we can look at and say, like, because of the influence of the church on the level of magistrate, there was a lot of good that happened across the Roman Empire. Now, I think we can say there are some areas, I mean, and historically, especially as Protestants, we can say as doctrinal children of the reformers, there was definitely some problems with bleeding too much theological significance into the magistrate, but I don't think Constantine was as guilty of that. I think he was a legit believer. I think he was trying to bless the church. I think that he was operating out of a very Roman understanding of politics and religion, which did not have a lot of separation at the time. So yeah, but I mean, I think in terms of just bad PR, Constantine's super controversial.
Yeah. So if you think of Constantine as only a bad guy in history, maybe read Defending Constantine by Peter Leithart.
It's a good book. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, cool. So I had thought of that one, and then the other one I thought of was Boniface.
Okay.
Because with Boniface, which we don't have a specific Boniface episode, but you hear us chat a little bit about it in one of the Celtic Christianity podcast episodes. Mm-hmm. But with Boniface, really what is controversial is not necessarily like him as a person, but really like the method. That's what gets argued over, is like, how should the gospel encounter various cultures, and in particular, if the culture is super pagan, like what should it look like? And so if you're not familiar with the Boniface story, that's the one where, you know, they have the, I think it was the Thor tree or something like that. I can't remember if it was, I think it was Germanic. Anyway, he chops it down to show that Thor doesn't have as much power as God.
It's a very Elijah moment.
Yeah. And so some people would be like, nope, that's not how we should engage with other cultures. And other people are like, actually, that's exactly how we should do it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's controversial for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a good pick.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to go to our DMs. We got one from Ethan Ross. Ethan Ross said, love how accessible and available you've made church history. Big fans of the pod out here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Shout out Fayetteville, Arkansas.
What
up? Curious on where to best continue to study church history, or any other recommendations for resources, books, podcasts, etc. For podcasts, you're already in the best place imaginable. So keep it rocking, keep it rolling. Also, yeah, I mean, so something me and Tommy have talked about a few times, but is a big thing for us, is church history is often kind of used as like a propaganda piece for people within their tradition to highlight their tradition, which I don't think is bad. It just kind of is. And so I think that when you're studying church history, like, you know, if you want to hear from a dude from Pints with Aquinas, that's great, but you're going to get a very Thomist, very Catholic opinion. If you want to read a Ligonier article, like, that's fine, but you're going to get a very Presbyterian, very Reformed response. So I think the first thing that I always do whenever I'm reading church history is I always research the tradition and background of the person who I'm reading. And I like to read as much from seminary professors, someone who has like a really legit education and background, because then, like, I think what I really love, like, the deeply historical part of it. Anyone can tell a story that just makes the people in their tradition look like a bunch of superheroes, but I really want to get like the meat and potatoes of something that has some historical credibility to it. So I would say, you know, just start looking for topics that interest you. There's so much written out there, but always do your due diligence of looking up who you're reading from, because everyone is going to write history with a spin.
Right. I think if you're looking for a good, like, overview book that's written at the popular level, a good one would be Turning Points by Mark Knoll.
I've got that one.
Yeah, that one is a good book for just trying to if you're just trying to wrap your head around like what happened in the last 2,000 years. That'd be a good one to turn to.
I've heard good things about the history of Christianity by Justo Gonzalez, I think. I just got his audio book. I haven't read the physical copy, but I've got a pastor friend who's been reading that who says it's really, really impactful. So yeah, I'd say just start with something that's interesting to you and then read up. But yeah, there's a lot out there. Just know who you're reading from.
Thanks, Ethan. All right. So next question, John, this is on well, I'm not going to say what their name is because it's a podcast and I don't know if I endorse them or not.
Oh, that's okay.
What do you think of the non-denominational church?
That's a great question. Well, I used to be a pretty like proudly non-denom kind of guy because I felt like denominations were like divisive, which I don't think that anymore. I'm part of a denomination. Yeah, I mean, the non-denom church in America is just, it's just an evangelical Baptist church. I mean, it's so hard because like John MacArthur's church is non-denominational. Calvary is also non-denominational. You could call a Foursquare church non-denominational. So that's such a broad question.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking globally, massive amounts of people who call themselves Christians globally are technically not in a denomination.
Yeah.
Also, massive amounts of them are. So the non-denominational church, even though that's hard to define, it has its warts, but I'm thankful for it. I mean, there's so many faithful churches and Christians that are non-denominational. I almost feel like the non-denominational church isn't even exactly the right way to describe it. I
will say one thing is that, so since I work as a hospice chaplain part-time in a retirement community outside of Tucson, I've been subjected to a lot of mainline Christian culture, and it's so fascinating to me. Like, I've never been asked more in my life, like as a chaplain, like what my denomination is. Like, I feel like in our generation, denominational talk is kind of lost its relevance because I think that American Christianity is kind of being seen as like this big, just glob thing. But back then, when you're in the mainline world, like PCUSA means something, Methodist means something, Episcopal means something. And now it's almost like the non-denominational route kind of shows that over time, we kind of lost our appetite for denominational distinctions, which does mean that we kind of went least common denominator in terms of theology, but it also means that we're expressing those values in other places, because most non-denom churches really big on sola scriptura, really big on faith alone, really big on evangelizing, and those are all things that I think we'd say are solid. So yeah, long answer, but fan.
Cool.
Here you go. Man, Ellen just blasted us with 16 different questions. Ellen says, Thomas, do you ever play in the snow?
Do I ever play in the snow?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not my favorite, but it's more fun with kids now too, because they kind of have that initial wonder.
When's the last time you played in the snow?
Well, I was up on Mount Lemmon this week, but I didn't really play in the snow. Last time I really played in the snow, probably a couple years ago.
Okay.
With my son. Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I was in snow. I don't ever really play in the snow. For those who don't know, Tucson is not a snow-friendly place. We are very close to mountains where it snows quite a bit. So we're like 30 minutes away from snow on a average winter day. But I don't really play with snow.
Yeah.
There you go.
So here's another one from Ellen. What's the best book on early church history?
Oh, shoot.
I've got an interesting take on this.
You have an interesting take. I mean, I think that my take is like the patristics. Like, if you're going to read about the early church, just read the early church.
Put it right here.
You know?
That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say it's so accessible. Mm-hmm. Like I think we have an idea that reading source documents is really hard. There's really not that many people in church history that are actually hard to understand. Yeah, there's only a couple of the maybe Thomas Aquinas. Even Aquinas is going to be really accessible in a lot of ways. Yeah. But a couple of the intellectual titans like Aquinas, Augustine, Calvin. Even Calvin's extremely accessible. Right. And pastoral. That I guess that's proving my point. Even the most intellectually advanced theologians in church history are really easy to read. Yeah. And the patristics are not excluded from that.
And the beautiful thing about the Christian church having such a rich historical background is that these texts have been in circulation for so long. There's a lot of good translations from the original Latin or Greek or whatever, and there's a lot of good commentary. And there's a lot of this stuff is available online on PDFs because a lot of it's public domain. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can read Tertullian and Clement and Irenaeus, and this stuff is super, super accessible. I will say there is a great book I've been reading through called When the Church Was Young, and it does these little chapter profiles, kind of these mini biographies, and it does Ambrose, Jerome, Irenaeus, Origen, Tertullian. It's so many of these little chapters. There's one on Justinian, which I'm excited for, and I really appreciate that. Very accessible language, and it uses a lot of quotes and references their theological impact, but also their biography. So I would encourage that. When the Church is Young, very, very easy book to read.
Sweet.
Is it my turn?
I think so.
Okay. Hey, Grace Hunt 409 asks, favorite songs / artists?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Favorite songs.
Just give me if you could go to a concert.
Oh yeah.
With what's your dream lineup? Give me 3 acts.
Okay.
And they can be drastically different genres.
And they're not necessarily in particular order here, just maybe when they're coming to mind. But the original lineup of Pink Floyd live would be really cool for me to see. Probably something more bluegrassy, like when Chris Stapleton was in the Steel Drivers. That would be cool to see. And man, what's one if you could have anybody maybe from back in time? I don't know, Elvis. I don't like Elvis at all.
I was like, oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Shoot, yeah. I've been going through this phase where I listened to a lot of hip hop for 12 years straight, and I think now I'm getting to the point where I'm gonna have kids soon, and I don't want them to hear this stuff for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I need to start weaning myself off of this explicit stuff. So if you asked me a year ago, I would have said, I'm a big Kanye fan. I love everybody at Griselda Records. So I love West Side Gun and Conway the Machine. Very vulgar gangster rappers. Yeah. But nowadays, I mean, I've actually had a really deep appreciation for older country. I love Hank Williams.
Yeah, I've seen you a couple times. You belt out some of the classics.
Oh yeah, I love Hank Williams. I love Johnny Cash. I've been really getting into Chris Christopherson lately. So I mean, I love those dudes, and there's just something when you've been in the trap game and you're just listening to dudes talk about the worst crime they ever committed, and then you just listen to Me and Bobby McGee, which is just a dude who used to hitchhike with this girl he liked, and then she ran away, and he thinks about her sometimes. I'm like,
it's healing.
That's slightly more relatable to my life.
Yeah,
I'm loyal to my wife, but I get it. So that's what I listen to. All right, your turn, man.
Let's see. Has any Orthodox Christian ever made the case for remaining married in heaven?
Man, I do remember one class in seminary where my professor basically he kind of challenged the mystery. He didn't say like we definitely do, but he was kind of like, but what if rather than, because I think what we see is kind of a fork in the road theologically. We see either Christ being the full manifestation of what marriage is, which I think is where I lean. I think that's where traditionally Christians lean. And then like, or what if marriage, rather than being fulfilled, is redeemed in that we can experience it perfectly, but with those that we created a covenant with. And I don't like that view. But I think that I could be curious about it, is what I'll say.
It's funny that this question came in because this past weekend I just preached out of Mark 12 when the Sadducees are asking Jesus about the resurrection and the question of whether or not, who this woman would be married to. She was married to 7 brothers.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Jesus doesn't really, his main point is that they're asking the wrong question for the wrong reasons, not necessarily giving us a screenshot of what the new creation would look like. But I think the thing that we wrestle with is like, the reality that God made marriage good, he made gender good, he made sexuality good. So wouldn't all of those things be in the new creation?
Yeah.
But Scripture doesn't say that. But to answer your question, while I was studying, there was one. So Tertullian said, all the more we shall be bound to them, our departed spouses, because we are destined to a better estate, destined to rise to a spiritual partnership. We will recognize both our own selves and those to whom we belong. Else how shall we sing thanks to God to eternity if there shall remain in us no sense and memory of this relationship? Or if we shall be reformed only materially but not in consciousness, consequently we who are together with God shall remain together. In eternal life, God will no more separate those whom he has joined together than in this life where he forbids them to be separated. This is from a sermon he had on monogamy. So I think what he's saying there isn't that you stay married in the new creation, but what he's saying is the person who you're married to, like leaving out the stupid scenario that the Sadducees tried to bring up with Jesus of like married to 7 brothers thing.
Right.
But like the person that God has joined you together in marriage to, like you won't lose the closeness of that bond just because it's in the new creation. But marriage probably, just strictly scripturally speaking, isn't the best way to describe what governs that bond.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think
Sweet.
that's solid. Also, Tertullian was a Montanist, so
I was gonna say, like, whether you take Tertullian's words, or not. But
the reason we don't call him Saint Tertullian, that was a great question, though. Thank you, Mr. Santos. Let's see. Your dork brother asked, if God do everything, why can't make Big Rock? He can't move. Lol. Checkmate.
That was also in the sermon about the Sadducees. I used that exact example. I was like, this is like the Sadducees asking this question.
Yeah.
It's just a stupid question.
I will, okay, not
What's
to
your
entertain,
answer, though? What's your answer?
to entertain that. So I do remember researching this one time, probably when I was in high school. It wasn't this one.
You were like,
specifically. Oh no, my faith is falling apart. Crawling in my skin. But it was like, I think the better way I heard it was, can God create a 2-sided triangle? And I think that the answer for it was that what God cannot do is contradict himself or the law of the universe in the way that he created it.
Right.
Because like, I think in a very like Catholic philosophical sense, like that's how we understand truth, is that like, yeah, can God make like a square that is a circle? It's like, no, because that doesn't make sense.
Right. And it doesn't change who God is.
Exactly. Yeah. So dumb question. Move on, atheists. Your turn.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church the true remnant through which God restores all things? It gets cut off. I believe this is a member of your church that asked this.
Yeah, that's my buddy Jacob. Shout out
Jacob.
No.
All right, moving on.
I mean, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is, I think, the largest sect of the Oriental Orthodox community, which would have separated from the church after the Council of Chalcedon in response to being accused of being Eutychian people. It's very, very old tradition in Ethiopia. Lots of Christians there, but I don't even know if they think they're the only true remnant. But if they are,
well, this kind of pans into the next question that we have, which is from Timothy. What are your thoughts on modern day Eastern Orthodoxy?
I think it's cool. You know, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting trying to see Eastern Orthodoxy from an American lens because they're so underrepresented here. I would love to know what a Russian or like Ukrainian or Armenian Christian had to say about Orthodoxy, because in the East, that's where their influence is felt.
Right.
But I think that I think one thing that Protestants don't really recognize when we talk about Catholics, like they are so far away from us, is like Eastern Orthodox Christians see Protestants as Western Christians because our background is extremely Western. I think that when we looked at a lot of the very influential figures that the Orthodox Church really appreciates, like dudes like St. Athanasius, and they obviously have a deep affection for the Desert Fathers. I think it's really cool seeing how Eastern theology approaches things in ways that are different and place different emphases. I've watched a couple YouTube videos from Callistos Ware, who just passed away, I think last year. And I thought he was really interesting, an interesting guy. I mean, I disagree. I don't think they're not Christians. I think that's all I can really say.
Yeah. And I don't think that they would all say the same thing about us, which just makes it awkward, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's the thing. I've heard different things. I've heard people say that the Orthodox Church is the one true church, and to be outside of it is to be, condemned. And I've heard some say, "Hey, we're all just chilling, big guy."
Right.
So who's to say? I don't know.
Okay.
But I did speak with an Orthodox priest here in town who said he'd be willing to come on our show. So
sweet. Okay, looking forward to it.
Yeah, one day. Let's see. Did John give Dead Throne a listen yet? From Slice of Mar Cake. Slice of Mar Cake, let me tell you, I read this question when you asked it like a week ago, and I was like, I better not forget to do that. And I freaking forgot to do that, which is a bummer because I've been listening to just like a lot of Christian metal again lately. Like I listened to a couple Haste the Day albums like a week ago, and I'm just having a good time. Like I said, that couple episodes ago, I'm just having a blast. But I haven't listened to Dead Throne. I will do it soon. In fact, the next time we record, Thomas, I will mention Dead Throne.
Sweet.
And I will be thinking of you, Slice of
Mar
Cake.
Well, I just love that this dude is like, it's the best album, which I'm pretty sure is what I'm just imagining. I'm so happy for you that you had that podcast moment where you're just like listening, like you're going to listen to an episode on whatever it was. And then all of a sudden, like we're talking about your favorite album and playing a portion of it on the pod. Like that had to have been sweet. I would have been stoked if that was me. So you're welcome.
Yeah. I still have such a soft spot towards Plagues. And I just realized that I think Spotify started using the old cover before it became like all bright and colorful, the one that's just like the lady with leprosy, or something like that, which I love. I literally remember when that album came out. Like that's when I started listening to The Devil Wears Prada. But I'll listen to Dead Throne. I promise. Slice of Mar Cake.
Sweet. Faith Gainey, favorite lady in church history, or should I say church history mother, she says.
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously have a big soft spot towards you. That's crazy. Big soft spot towards Julian of Norwich. I love Julian of Norwich. I've been reading more from Teresa of Avila lately. She was a head of a convent during the Counter-Reformation, which was a really interesting time because they were basically like, oh, Protestants suck. Everyone's leaving the Catholic faith. We need to like clean house and make things just kind of fix up shop. And one of the cool things that came out of the Counter-Reformation was a lot of really rich mystic literature. Like St. John of the Cross wrote Dark Night of the Soul, and then Teresa of Avila wrote Interior Castle. And Interior Castle is this kind of like deep reflection of what it looks like to open yourself to these like deep, intimate types of like prayer and like connecting your soul with that of God. It's very personal. It's very reflective. It's really interesting, and it's a really cool time in history. So I think Teresa of Avila is up there for me right now. I've also been trying to look up some more of Saint Hildegard, who was a German lass. And I don't know, Joan of Arc. We'll definitely do an episode on her one day.
I was thinking like Joan of Arc might end up being a cool one, but I haven't really studied her that much.
That's my thing too. I can't phone in an episode on Joan of Arc. She was on our original logo, you know?
Yeah. So I would say, I think that there's a handful of women in our Protestant tradition that we don't talk about or hear about a whole lot, but they're really important to the Protestant story because they were supporting, caring for their husbands.
Like Martin Luther's mom and John Calvin's mom, Zwingli's mom.
All those ladies.
I'm just trolling you.
Well, I thought maybe there was something about Martin Luther's mom and then you kept going, and I was like, I never heard about Zwingli's mom.
Margaret Luther.
Zwingli's mom. No, actually, I think a good one that maybe we should do a podcast on sometime is Katharina von Bora, which is Martin Luther's wife.
Oh, okay.
I think they had like a bunch of kids, and it's just a cool side to that story that we don't normally talk about. But
yeah. Okay.
What's next?
Let's see. It's hard.
We had a good one from Nick somewhere. What was that one?
Yeah, where did that one go? Oh, what have you learned from church history that has made a formational impact on how you pastor? From Postal Pastor.
Nice.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think studying church history has a formational impact on pastors in a couple ways. I think that it helps you understand the contours of the church in a way that helps you love the church and understand her better. And so when there's people who end up in your flock that have differing opinions or theology, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's not just because they decided that. Usually it's because they were formed in some way by a tradition. And so understanding like what those streams are that are forming people today is critical.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably the biggest thing.
That's good. As you were talking, I was thinking church history really casts a big spotlight on just how impactful culture is going to be in shifting how somebody worships and how they practice the Christian faith. And I think that's just a good reminder for us because we are all so affected by the culture around us, and that's something to be aware of, but also as pastors, something we want to preach against, that we can learn how to like sprinkle grace over our culture, but also not become affected by the culture in a way that takes us out of worship. But I just love the idea that like what we're doing as pastors in our city, in our nation, in this time in history, like we're part of the unfolding story of church history. Like, so when we tell stories about church history, and when we're informed by church history, we're just cracking open the family tree. So I just love the idea, and I want to communicate this more when I preach, of just like we are part of a story that is thousands of years old, and it's not just a story of like human history, it's a story of God in history, which I think is really cool. So that's for me.
Good.
I just saw one. Shoot. It was Timothy Maj asking, what practice helps you connect most with God?
Nice.
That's a good question.
Well, if we're talking about just practices outside of just the context of worshiping with the church on the Lord's Day, which I have found to be the best practice, over the last couple of years, I've really started enjoying using the Book of Common Prayer and the Daily Office. And I've used it intermittently. I found it best when I've just found a few others who want to commit to reading it and using it daily for a certain period of time. So like I did that during Advent this last year, and I'm doing it again during Lent right now. And yeah, it's good. If you're in the Daily Office morning and evening, it puts you through the Psalms, the entirety of the Psalms once a month, and exposes you to good chunks of the rest of Scripture, a lot of historical prayers from the saints, just a lot of good stuff. So I would say, if you haven't picked up the Book of Common Prayer as a resource, the way I talk about it to people when I'm introducing it is, the Book of Common Prayer is made for you, not the other way around. So it's not like this thing that has to be burdensome, but it's an awesome historical resource.
Yeah. For me, I often think about, I think it was St. Anthony who said, go into your cell and it will teach you everything you need to know. I'm a big practitioner, I guess, of silence and solitude. I haven't done like as many retreats as that would indicate like that I would possibly have, but I just like, one of my favorite times of day is probably the end of the night for me, taking my two dogs outside to go for a little stroll when the night's just very still and quiet and my wife's getting ready for bed. Like just those moments of silence where we're kind of shutting ourselves off from as many outside influences, whether it's people or screens or audio, and just being able to have that moment of thinking of God, listening to God, speaking to God, I think is just super, super rich. And I think that in this day and age of just the world being as loud as it's ever been, and our devices being as attractive as they've ever been, having that time of just like meaningful disengagement is just, I don't know, I'm not even saying it because I'm like, oh, I'm such a pious person for this. It's just like, no, it feels good. Like it makes my day better. It gives my brain dopamine. And I think it's because it's impactful, like it's God.
Good.
Shoot, I think are we running low already? It's like we're answering them so quickly, so efficiently.
See. Ken Ham sent in a question.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Where did Cain get his wife? Says Ken Ham, says my friend Stephen Lewis. Where did Cain get his wife? He's probably one of his sisters, right? Weirdo.
Yes, but I think that by that time, I'm just shooting from the hip here. I think that by that time, by the time he's getting his wife after the slaughter of his brother, there is probably multiple generations. That's a very, very distinct possibility here. But yeah,
it's probably a sister.
If we're dealing with this question seriously.
Or like a cousin, probably.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of weird. I mean, it's unavoidable at that time, and I don't think it was weird.
No, it wasn't.
It's weird to talk about.
It's how God made the world, but
yeah.
It's there's good. It's funny he mentioned Ken Ham.
Did Ken Ham have what's Ken Ham's relevance to that?
I'm sure that I wouldn't be surprised if that's an actual Ken Ham quote, but it's like but it's probably Ken pointing out that Cain did have to marry one of his sisters.
Yeah.
But if we're actually, I feel like we have to answer this question like
seriously?
For real now. Just
yeah,
not
you're
leaving.
right.
So my thoughts on that are twofold. Like, obviously this is at the beginning of human history. It's also before, we have the Mosaic law that would specifically forbid this. You have to have something like this in order for people to produce, and their genetics were different. That's the fundamentally important thing to point out.
Yeah, and it, was by design. And what makes incest weird and gross is the fact that that's not by design.
There wasn't anything
anymore.
Weird and gross about it then.
Exactly. It was still kind of what family could and should be doing. Now,
hey,
you shouldn't. I don't know.
Wait, what did you just say?
I said it's what family could and should be doing.
What could then should they be doing?
Like procreating.
Oh, but not with each other.
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
I mean, at a certain point, they probably had to be like, let's go a little farther down the line, I think.
That's what the whole Babel thing is about, right? Like, we get to the Babel, and they're all trying to hang out in one spot. And God's like, no, I told you to spread out.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't God's intention for them to keep the family tree looking like a stick.
Yeah, that's interesting. You think kinists look at that? I don't know if I want to talk about kinists. Never mind. Kinists probably look at the story of Cain marrying his sister and they're like, yeah, no, keep it close to home.
I don't think that's what kinists believe.
I think it's
before we get all the kinist hate mail on our.
I am perfectly fine getting kinist hate mail. I am perfectly fine. Hey, Thomas, what's a dream series for you for us to do on this podcast?
I really want to tackle the Crusades at some point. And I'm not ready to do that.
Me neither.
I don't want to. Some of the stuff that we've done has been half-baked. I mean, that's kind of like our MO. And sometimes is like, we're just like, here's some stuff we found. Like, we're just trying to expose you to ideas. I don't want to do that with the Crusades because everybody already comes to the table with preconceived notions about it.
Yeah.
Most people are at least familiar that they happened. And so I've got, that's like my next learning goal, I think, for myself, is just doing a bunch of my own reading on it. And it'll be interesting when we do it because I'm not even sure if you and I will have the exact same thoughts, or maybe we will. I think that we lean the same direction with it right now.
But what if we don't?
It'll be cool.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. But that's the dream series for me. I'd like to for sure tackle the Crusades.
That's a good one. Yeah, I can't wait to do that. Oh, dude, I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the episode. I can think of a moment when I think we lost about 100 listeners. I was listening to our old Q&A, and we talked for so long about the situation with John Calvin and Arminius getting burned at the stake.
That never happened.
It wasn't Arminius. It was Michael Servetus. Jacobus Arminius was the Dutch dude who brought the idea of Arminianism, and I think he was the one whose ideas were shot down at the Canons of Dort, which is still one of the 3 forms of unity that my denomination holds to. But he was never freaking killed at the stake. He died of tuberculosis, and I was like, I feel like the dumbest guy.
Told you it was for chumps.
It was, yeah. We're still gonna do an episode one day on things we got wrong, which is just
details. A long episode.
Yeah, details that we missed out on. Or I think my favorite was we did that Marcionism episode, and I called Marcion Marcius the entire time. And the dude's
really?
name,
I didn't catch that.
His name, that's not his name.
Not his name.
Yeah. This isn't for a college paper if you're listening to this.
Oh man. Yeah.
We're just chit-chatting.
Might be better than using ChatGPT though for your paper.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But I don't know. It'd be kind of hard to cite a podcast.
It's true.
Yeah.
Did we run out of questions?
I think so. I don't know. Do we have any more?
I think that was good. Oh, Jared asked who is better, Maximus the Confessor or Joe Rogan?
Yeah. I think, cut from the same cloth, probably. I did look up Maximus the Confessor, which kind of set me down this rabbit hole of apophatic theology, which is when you make a theological claim about God that is built around negative statements rather than positive statements. So like saying that God is unknowable would be an apophatic statement. And that's just really interesting to me, but I don't know that much about Maximus the Confessor. I did read that he's called a confessor because he suffered for the faith but wasn't martyred for the faith, which kind of makes him sound like so
I really want to turn it back on Jared and be like, what do you know about Maximus the Confessor?
Yeah.
Or Joe Rogan?
I'll be honest, I'm a bigger fan of Minimus the Confessor.
Minimus the Confessor.
He's a little more low key for me, personally.
Well, cool. This has been fun.
This has been fun, yeah. Thank you guys so much for the questions. We will we'll plaster the link for this episode all over Instagram so all of you askers can be receivers. But yeah, thanks for being around, and we'll catch you next time.
Later.
See ya.